The story began in a way I never expected. My name is Nathan, and I'm 25 years old. After living and working abroad for several years, I decided to return home. I left when I was 22 to pursue my career in a distant place, and for the next 3 years, I only communicated with my family through occasional phone calls. But this time, I chose to visit my family after such a long absence. Stepping into the familiar house brought a mix of nostalgia and unfamiliarity. My parents, Mark and Rachel, were deeply emotional to see me again. The evening was spent reminiscing about the past, sharing laughter, and enjoying my mother's cooking, which I had missed so much. However, what surprised me the most was Lila, my younger sister. The last time I saw Lila, she was a small, sweet, but shy girl who would hide behind me when meeting strangers. But when Lila came out of her room to greet me, I could hardly believe what I was seeing. She had grown into a tall, confident woman. Her long hair flowed freely, her eyes sparkled, and her shy but warm smile struck me. It was a strange feeling, like meeting someone entirely new yet still familiar. "Nathan, it's been so long since I last saw you," Lila said with a smile, her voice now carrying a maturity I hadn't expected. I pulled her into a tight hug. "When did you grow so tall? I barely recognized you," I teased. Lila just chuckled, her cheeks flushed, but she said nothing more. Throughout the evening, I couldn't help but glance at her. Each movement she made brought back memories, but at the same time, I realized she had changed a lot. There was something in the way she spoke, in the way she laughed, that left me feeling confused, a mix of familiarity and something new, something elusive. When the night arrived, I headed to my room to rest after the long journey. My old room was still exactly how my mother had kept it, every detail stirring up memories. Feeling tired, I decided to take a shower. The warm water washed away the fatigue from the trip, giving me a sense of relief. After my shower, I put on a loose t-shirt and lay down on the bed, intending to take a nap. But once the lights were out, the quiet and darkness seemed to make my thoughts wander. Images of my family, especially Lila, filled my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about how much she had changed, and about the soft yet piercing look she had given me. I tried to push those thoughts away, convincing myself that it was just the strangeness of seeing my sister again after so many years. But the more I tried to ignore it, the clearer her image became. I recalled the way Lila used to smile when she was shy, how she tilted her head slightly when listening to our parents. Every small gesture, every little expression was engraved in my mind. As I lay there, I realized I was struggling with my emotions. Eventually, I let everything go, leaving behind only a feeling of warmth, mixed with slight confusion and discomfort. In the quiet darkness, I realized that everything around me was so still that I could hear my own breathing, yet my mind was restless. I couldn't stop thinking about Lila and how much she had changed over 3 years. It felt like I was meeting a completely new person. Memories of when we were younger came rushing back, when she used to follow me everywhere, calling out, "Brother Nathan, wait for me!" I thought about the times she hid behind me when she was scared, or when she bounced with joy whenever I brought her little gifts. But now, Lila wasn't that little girl anymore. The way she smiled, the look in her eyes, everything about her exuded confidence and charm, things I wasn't familiar with. I sighed quietly, closing my eyes to try to sleep, but then a soft knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts. "Brother Nathan, are you still awake?" Lila's voice called softly from outside. I sat up a little, surprised. "You're awake. What's up, Lila?" The door opened and Lila entered, still wearing the simple nightgown that highlighted her slim figure. She smiled shyly and sat on the edge of the bed. "I can't sleep," she said, her hands nervously clasped together, her eyes avoiding mine as though deep in thought. "I just wanted to talk to you for a bit. It's been a while since we last saw each other." I nodded, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, it has. So, what did you want to talk about?" We started off by talking about simple things, family, work, and our lives. Lila shared stories about her days at home with our parents, her studies, and the small joys she had experienced. But as we spoke, I noticed that her eyes sometimes seemed distant, as if there was something she wasn't telling me. "Brother Nathan," she said suddenly, stopping, her hands clenched tighter. "Do you think that when two people are apart for so long, they might change so much that they no longer understand each other the same way they once did?" Her question gave me pause. I looked at her, trying to read her expression. "I think so. But if there's still a connection, things will go back to the way they were." Lila gave a small, sad smile. "I hope so." We sat there in the dim light, the air between us suddenly feeling different. I could sense her closeness, the warmth of her soft breathing as she sat so near to me, but at the same time, there was an awkwardness that I couldn't explain. "Lila, what's wrong? Is something bothering you?" I asked gently, trying to stay calm. She didn't answer right away, just shook her head. "Nothing, Nathan. I guess I'm just overthinking." She then stood up and smiled at me again. "Okay, I'll go back to my room now. I won't bother you anymore. Good night, brother." "Good night, Lila," I replied, but my mind was still filled with questions I couldn't answer. When she closed the door behind her, I sat there, staring at the dark space in front of me. I could feel a strange emotion rising in my chest, familiar yet awkward, as if something between us had shifted, but I didn't want to face it. I lay back on the bed but couldn't sleep. My mind kept wandering back to Lila, her half-closed eyes, her soft voice as she left. There was something unusual in the way she looked at me, as if there was something she wanted to say but couldn't. The silence only deepened the uneasy feeling in my heart. Finally, feeling suffocated, I decided to go to the kitchen for a drink, hoping it would calm my mind. As I walked down the stairs, the dim light from the living room stopped me in my tracks. Through the half-open door, I saw Lila sitting on the sofa, her legs drawn up, hugging a pillow. Her eyes were fixed on the TV, but her mind seemed far away. I entered quietly so as not to startle her. "Are you still awake, Lila?" I asked. Lila jumped slightly, turning to face me with a flushed face. "I couldn't sleep, so I came down to watch TV for a bit." I sat down beside her, keeping a comfortable distance. "What's wrong? You've been restless since I got back." She bit her lip, looking down at her hands. After a pause, she shook her head. "It's nothing, Nathan. I guess it just feels strange, having you back after so long." I didn't push her, but the atmosphere between us was still tense. I noticed how mature Lila looked now, but I also sensed something fragile in her, like she was hiding something important from me. "You know," I said, trying to lighten the mood, "when I first came back, it felt strange too. You've changed so much. It was like I was meeting a whole new person." Lila turned to look at me, her eyes widening in surprise. "Is change a good thing or a bad thing, brother?" I smiled, trying to keep the mood light. "It's a good thing. You've grown up, matured, and become really beautiful." Lila blushed at the compliment and quickly looked away, but a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so soft that I barely heard it. A long silence followed, broken only by the soft hum of the TV. Then Lila spoke quietly, breaking the silence. "Nathan, I have a question, but I'm afraid it might sound strange." I raised an eyebrow, encouraging her to continue. "Ask. I promise I'll answer seriously." Lila hesitated, then let out a deep breath. If two people were once really close, but then one person starts to feel differently about the other, is that wrong? I paused. Her question pierced right through the emotions I had been trying to suppress. I wasn't sure how to respond, but I felt her waiting for an answer. "I think my feelings are never wrong, Lila, but what matters is how we act on them," I replied slowly, trying to stay calm. Lila nodded slightly, but said nothing more. She turned back to the TV, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. I didn't press her further, but I couldn't ignore how my heart was racing, each beat pounding in my chest. Part of me wanted to leave, to distance myself from the awkwardness, but another part of me couldn't stop watching her. Finally, I stood up, trying to sound normal. "Okay, I think I should head to bed. Don't stay up too late. We've got plenty of time to talk tomorrow." Lila looked at me and nodded. "Good night, brother." "Good night, Lila," I replied. As I left the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between us, but neither of us seemed ready to admit it. I returned to my room and closed the door softly, feeling the weight of the silence. But the quiet only heightened the confusion in my mind. Lila's question echoed in my thoughts. If two people were once close, but one of them feels differently, is that wrong? The way she looked at me, her unspoken words, all of it seemed to confirm a feeling I wasn't ready to confront. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling restless. The feelings between Lila and me that had built up since I arrived kept replaying in my mind. The shy smile she gave me when we first met, her meaningful questions, the way she came to me on the balcony. It all seemed to lead somewhere I wasn't prepared to admit. The next morning, I woke up to the soft light of the sun filtering through the door. My body felt heavy from the lack of sleep, but I didn't have time to think too much about it because the smell of freshly brewed coffee from the kitchen reminded me that a new day had started. As I walked down the stairs, I saw Lila standing by the kitchen counter making coffee. She wore a loose t-shirt and jeans, looking comfortable yet graceful. When she saw me, she turned with a gentle smile, but there was a calmness in her eyes that I immediately noticed. "Good morning, brother," she greeted me, her voice trying to sound casual. "I made some coffee. Would you like a cup?" "Yeah, thanks," I replied, trying to keep my admiration hidden. I sat down at the table, watching her pour the coffee into the mugs, her fingers lightly brushing against the cup's rim. It felt so familiar, but also different. We sat across from each other. The air between us was quiet but thick with unspoken words. I knew Lila wanted to say something, and I wanted to break the silence, but every time I opened my mouth, I couldn't find the right words. Finally, Lila spoke first. "Mr. Nathan, I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable last night," she said softly, her eyes cast down at the table. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, but also the sadness she tried to hide. "It's okay, Lila." I didn't know what to say either. Everything was just unexpected. She nodded, placing the coffee mug in front of her. "I understand. Maybe I'm just confused about everything." Her words made me realize that I wasn't the only one struggling with emotions I wasn't ready to face. I couldn't let her feel alone in this confusion. "Lila, listen," I said softly. "We're siblings. Time and distance might make things feel strange, but I believe this will pass. As long as we have respect for each other, everything will return to normal." Lila looked at me, her eyes filled with something, hope or maybe doubt, but she nodded after a while. "You're right. Maybe I'm just overthinking." The rest of the day passed with Lila avoiding me. She kept herself busy doing small chores around the house. I didn't try to approach her either, knowing that we both needed time to process our feelings. But this distance didn't ease the tension. Instead, it made everything feel more uncomfortable. In the evening, my parents, Mark and Rachel, announced they would be visiting a friend and wouldn't be back until later. I felt the situation growing more complicated. Now it was just Lila and me in the house. I had intended to retreat to my room early to avoid any more awkward situations, but then I heard a gentle knock at my door. "Nathan?" Lila's voice called softly. I opened the door to find her standing there, her face calm yet troubled. "Can we talk for a moment?" she asked softly, almost pleading. I didn't want to refuse, but something in her eyes made it impossible to turn her away. I nodded and stepped outside. We went downstairs to the living room, where soft golden light filled the room. Lila sat on the sofa, and I sat on the opposite side of the room. "I just wanted to explain myself," Lila said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't want you to think that I'm trying to do something wrong or that I'm a stranger to you. I just can't control what I'm feeling." My heart ached at her words. I wanted to interrupt her, to say something comforting, but I wasn't sure what to say. "Nathan," Lila continued, turning to face me, "I know my feelings aren't right, but I don't know how to stop them." Her words hit me hard, like a knife, but at the same time they made me realize something I had been trying to avoid. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But how could I, when I didn't know how to deal with my own emotions? I looked at her, ready to say something, but she stood up, walking away from me. "I shouldn't have thought like this. I'm sorry." With that, she quickly left the room, leaving me sitting there, filled with a rush of emotions. I sat there quietly, the soft yellow light of the room unable to warm the cold that settled in my heart. Lila's words, the emotions she revealed, and the feelings within me all built up like a pressure that couldn't be ignored. I couldn't help but blame myself. How had things gotten to this point? Part of me wanted to walk away, to escape this confusing situation and the feelings I couldn't face. But another part of me held me back. I didn't want to leave her in this state, to make her feel like she was alone or that she was being rejected. I stood up and walked slowly upstairs, stopping outside Lila's room. The door was slightly ajar, the soft glow of her bedside lamp spilling into the hallway. I knocked softly, my voice barely a whisper. "Lila, may I come in?" There was no response. I pushed the door open and found her sitting on the edge of her bed, her head bowed, hands clasped in her lap. She didn't look up, but I knew she was aware of my presence. "Lila," I said gently, moving to sit beside her, "I don't know what to say to make things better, but I'm here, and I don't want you to feel like you have to go through this alone." Lila looked at me, her eyes full of unshed tears, but no tears fell. "Nathan," she whispered, "I know I'm wrong, but I can't stop feeling like this. Every time I see you, I can't stop thinking about you." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my own emotions in check. I knew there was nothing I could say to ease her turmoil, or even mine, but I had to do something. I had to say something to keep us from spiraling deeper into this uncertainty. "Lila, you're my sister," I said slowly, trying to steady my voice. "These feelings might be the result of us being apart for so long, making things feel unfamiliar, but we need to remember who we are to each other and the role we play in each other's lives." Lila was silent, staring at me, her eyes filled with pain, but also searching for something, maybe reassurance. "You're right," she whispered after a long pause. "But I don't know how to forget this feeling, Nathan. I just want things to go back to how they were, when I was just your little sister, and you were the brother I always looked up to." I placed my hand gently on her shoulder, offering a sense of comfort. "I want that too, Lila, and I believe that time will help you through it. I'll be here to help us get back to what we had, brotherly love, closeness, but we can't cross that line we both know can't be crossed." Lila nodded, resting her head lightly on my shoulder. In that moment, we stayed there for a while, neither of us saying anything, just quietly letting the silence help us calm down. Eventually, I stood up, offering her a gentle smile. "Go to sleep, Lila. Tomorrow is a new day. I believe we'll be okay." Lila smiled faintly, a sad but relieved expression. "Good night, Mr. Nathan. Thank you." I left her room and closed the door behind me, feeling like I had crossed a thin, necessary line. Everything inside me was still chaotic, but I knew I had made the right decision, holding on to what was right despite the difficult emotions. That night, I lay in bed feeling lighter for the first time in days. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least we had taken the first step toward healing, for her and for myself. From this story, I learned a valuable lesson. Emotions are a natural part of life, but how we face and manage them is what truly matters. Sometimes, we get caught up in conflicting emotions, especially when unexpected changes disrupt our familiar understanding of things. The key is to stop, reflect, and choose the right path. Love is not just a simple feeling, it's also a responsibility towards others and ourselves. Establishing necessary boundaries, even when it's hard, is crucial for maintaining respect and healthy relationships. We all face intense, sometimes confusing emotions about ourselves and the relationships around us. When that happens, remember that emotions are natural, but our actions must be guided by wisdom and values. Take time to understand your feelings instead of acting impulsively. Respecting boundaries in relationships is essential for maintaining trust and attachment. And if you feel lost, turn to trusted family members or friends, or listen to your heart, but always act with self-control. It not only protects you from mistakes, but also preserves the precious relationships you hold dear. This story ends here, with unforgettable lessons and a sense of relief that everything has been seen through with clarity. Life continues, and I believe with sincerity and respect, we'll maintain this sacred family bond. Thank you for listening to our story. If you found it interesting and meaningful, don't forget to leave a like to support. See you in the next video. Wishing everyone always happy.